It is farming, and it's how to multi-use both property and equipment. And I think this is one of the few industries where there's so many single-use everything. I mean, even the vineyard itself, I see like 7 feet of wasted space between every row, and think, what else can we be doing with it as well? I look at equipment, stuff that's barely used for 2 to 4 weeks out of the year and then sits all year. So I'm trying to figure out how to multi-use the land more than anything. You know, how to work with animals on the property, still keep grapes as your, you know, your main crop and your main focus, but yeah, just layer it the way farms used to be. And I think this monoculture does more harm than good when it comes to farming. And I think that's sort of led me down the path of, as I want to make better wine, you got to have better fruit, and better fruit comes from better soils. And the only way to get the soils back is to take care of the soils, which means, you know, good nutrition, good balance, and really trying to read and understand the landscape that you work. And I think that's, you know, my big little goal, I think, moving forward. I mean, bubbles are always going to be, you know, the breadwinner and my passion and my focus, but I think there's so much to it, and I think we've, you know, generationally lost that, and, you know, I just want it back. So yeah, I want that, you know, I want to know that I can have a sustainable farm that can sustain itself and us. I like to know where all the food comes from. I like to know what's in everything, and that, I think, is what motivates us to push to make the wine styles that we do. And, you know, it's like I want to eat and drink the food that I want to eat and drink, and I think others are just following suit. And I think that's the type of passion that'll, you know, it's changing our industry as we speak. It's, you know, kind of one of the reasons you're here. It's just to be able to talk about, you know, where is our future? I think we've been misled for too long through, you know, through the desire for profit. And don't get me wrong, because ourselves, we have to make profit or we die. It's the life cycle of a business. If, you know, but I think we can do it morally and ethically that isn't at the expense of something else. And I think farming today, if it's farmed with agrochemicals, is at the expense of the land. And now we're starting to see those results around the world, that, you know, we have to take care of the soil. And, you know, as a byproduct, you'll get the best quality fruit, which allows you to then make the best quality product with it. But at the end of the day, you know, I still have to make profit the same way every other company out there does. But I think we're at a threshold that is about, you know, the desire to do things morally and ethically. So, I mean, we mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, my assistant Kathleen, I was so excited to discover she has not eaten a protein in the last 4 months that she didn't know how it was raised or where it came from. And I see that as a trend, not against vegetarianism or vegans or anything else like that. It's just that if you're going to choose to eat a protein, you want to know where it came from, what it was fed, how it was raised, and to get away from the big, you know, the big mass commodities that, you know, half the illnesses and diseases in farm animals today are because of mass production. And, you know, and it's too bad. We had balance on a farm 100 years ago, and we don't have that anymore. And I think that's a lot of the resurgence to, you know, this whole natural wine movement and sustainable farming or natural farming. It's to, you know, to pay a little more attention to the land outside of just listing off chemical nutrients that it needs. Like, it's paying attention to the weeds, because certain weeds will only pop up when there's certain deficiencies in the soil. And I'm a big believer that everything on earth has the ability to heal. And that's what the land is trying to do when certain weeds are popping up. And yes, some can be invasive, but I think they're also there for a reason. And if we came back 5 or 10 years later, chances are those weeds will not even be anywhere near there anymore. And it has to go through these cycles, because these weeds are then providing the nutrients that that soil needs as these plants break down again, and then everything cycles through. And I think that's what we're missing. We haven't stepped back far enough. Like, we know how to change DNA, but we haven't stepped far enough back long enough to look at cycles and, you know, and to understand how our region works. And I think as BC is, you know, an amazing up and coming region, I think we need to focus more on what it means to be proudly BC and to stand behind our uniqueness, our flavors, you know, our terroir. I think we need to find our terroir, and I don't think we've found it yet. I think we need, as they say, we need to sort of stop and listen and still make a profit, but we need to pay more attention to, I think, some of these longer cycles that are just our region and our flora and our fauna are trying to tell us, but we're not listening to. So. Organic vegetables were trendy. They're still with us. You know, I think there's a lot of factors in the sense that we've been led down a path with healthcare to find out not everything was true when it came to our foods, what government is recommending to us for foods. And I think natural wine is fulfilling that role with a certain population that does have the means to care about what goes in our food. And I even get sad in just saying that statement, because I know there's those out there that can't afford $30, $40, $50 bottles of wine, but they still want something, and they have to trust that the marketing is true. And I don't know, it's just the game is changing, and I think a lot of the players just don't want to adapt, or even the owners or the mentality just doesn't want to adapt. And it's not, I mean, there's arguments on both sides and everything that, you know, natural this, natural that. I think natural wine is going to come down to understanding the producer and how transparent they are with what they do. I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking something in a wine if you need to make the wine better. But I do think it should be relayed to the consumer, and it should be understood. If the consumer wants to know why, that should be very easily explainable too. And I think that is a bit of the disconnect. Everyone's focused on the minute details. What is the maximum parts per million of sulfur that are allowed? What is, you know, what cannot do? And I think it's a transition shift, and it's a whole new learning too, that, you know, it's easy if a wine starts to smell and react a certain way. We've been taught to add this to it to fix it. It's easy. But now if you were to do it naturally, a lot of times, a lot of that fixing is preventative work that, you know, with higher acids, you know, a cleanliness, and still an understanding of chemistry to know what is going on, and then trying to figure out how to fix it without the chemicals or the enzymes or whatever. So, but at the end of the day, and it's the best quote I just heard the other day was, actually I think it was someone Christine Rasmussen was interviewing in Europe, and I forget the winemaker's name, but it came down to my whole goal as a winemaker or making wine or farming is to take care of the earth and to make wine that has meaning. And for us, wine isn't a commodity. They're like kids with personalities, and I'm trying to coax out what that individual personality is from all the different places that we get grapes from. And if you come in, I'm pretty sure you're going to connect with one of them. And that's always been my goal with wine, is that I do want it to resonate. I want it to evoke emotion. And it can be excitement, it can be confusion, it can be something that you hopefully positively take away from that wine because it made you feel. And that's a connection I think everyone should have with wine. And if you don't have it, I mean, Naramata alone, 40 plus wineries on the bench, you know, there's probably what, 300 to 400 different wines just on our bench that if you didn't like something I made, I can guarantee I can point you in a direction that you will like. So there's enough out there that you should never have to sit on the fence with it. It should resonate with you, and it's like when you meet someone, you click or you don't click. And that's how wine should be. You should just effortlessly click with that wine. You shouldn't have to justify it, but it should just be something you want to drink. And that's how I define our wines, is I make wines for my wife and I, and that's stuff we want to drink. And we want to know that there's very little in it, and we want to know that we put our heart and soul into it, and that's what resonates with us. So, and every winery is different, and that's what makes the whole experience unique, because you are going to get different philosophies and different approaches and everything else. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about, you know, there's an organic section in the food market and there's a non-organic. I would love to see organic bigger than non-organic, but that's just my dream. But price points are factors in all of this. Like, there's just so many variables that, you know, it's not one that I want to define by saying natural wine is this. I want to define it by saying I'm trying to make honest wines with a personality, and I happen to do it by not trying to add anything I don't have to. And, you know, I mentioned it earlier where I started looking at all these different processes, and I started looking at every ingredient, and it came down to, does it make the wine better or does it make my job easier? And I found that majority of the ingredients were to make the job easier. But because we're small, and at 2,000 case small, my challenges are so much different than a 10 or 50,000 case winery. So to try and have them squeeze into this movement, if you want to call it, is very, very tough. So now you've changed the game and almost excluded a certain part, which I get why there's so much pushback, because it's like changing any industry. It's, you know, it's not, some are gonna love it, some are gonna hate it. So all you have to do is decide, you know, what you want. And yeah, it doesn't matter the write-ups and the scores and all this stuff. If you don't know within a split second of tasting that wine whether you like it or not, then move on. And that's as hard as wine has to be. So.